I think you're amazing.
You are too, Henry.
Thank you so much. Well, Perry, you are awesome.
Thank you, brother. Thank you, and I appreciate you what you're doing too, buddy.
Well, thank you. Because if you allow the world to define you, if you allow friends to define you, if you allow your spouse to define you, or anybody to define you outside of how God sees you, that does open the door to rejection. God bless you. I hope y'all have an amazing day.
Thank you, Brother Henry.
Thank
God
you.
bless you too. Thank you for having us.
Welcome to the Brother Henry and You Show. I am your host, Henry Harris. Thank you so much for taking this opportunity to watch today. We have a very, not only powerful program, I would say very informative, educational program for you today that I really believe will help you because there are so many people that is involved with this subject that is almost unreal. And our subject today is trauma bonding real? Now I say if it's real because I've heard that word trauma bonding quite a bit, especially over the last several years. One person will say trauma bonded, and you hear it from somebody else talking about it, but I really never looked into it. So I started to question, is that a real thing? And after doing my research and having conversations with friends who were involved in trauma bonding relationships, I discovered that it most certainly is a real thing. And so real that I wanted to dedicate today's program to talk about it because trauma bonding is a real thing and it is something that is worth a discussion. So you may want to take some notes. We'll be putting notes on the stream for you. And as I said, this will be mainly more educational because a lot of people, just like me at one time, I heard that word. I didn't know what it meant, but I really believe it's going to inspire so many of you today. And after you watch today's show, you may even look at your life and say, I think I'm in a trauma bonding relationship. I think I'm in a trauma bonding marriage. And maybe I need to release myself from that. So I think this show will really benefit you today. So the definition of trauma bonding to those that are watching, trauma bonding is a psychological response to abuse. The person experiencing abuse may develop sympathy for the abusive person, which becomes reinforced by cycles of abuse, followed by remorse. Trauma bonding occurs when the abused person forms a connection or relationship with the person who abuses them. So, for many years, I've heard that word trauma bonding from a variety of people, and after hearing it numerous times, I started to wonder if it was even authentic, if trauma bonding was a real thing. I was not familiar with it as I am not familiar with many subjects, but if I have an interest in it, I would like to talk about it or at least do some research. So, after doing my research, I have discovered that it's not only real, but it is something that so many people today deal with. So, as I was looking at the definition of trauma bonding, these are a few things that came to my mind. Number one, the victim develops sympathy for the abuser. Now imagine that. The victim, that is the one that is being abused by the perpetrator. The victim develops sympathy for the person who's harming them and who's hurting them. This simply means that no matter what behavior the abuser is doing towards the victim, for some crazy and strange reason, the victims develop sympathy for the abuser. It's almost like they have a pity for the abuser. It's almost like the more the abuser traumatizes and creates trauma and hurts the victim turns around and expresses remorse and sympathy and feels sorry for the person that's abusing them. That is trauma bonding. That is the psychological response of abuse, according to the definition of trauma bonding. Another thing that came to my mind is number two. The victim, which is the one that's being abused, will start to have a strong remorse. In other words, feelings of guilt and shame. This is one of many reasons the victim have a hard time walking away or leaving because they sometimes feel hopeful and the guilt keeps them lingering around. The victim should never feel shameful. It is the abuser that should feel shameful. So, once again, sometimes the victim will develop a strong remorse towards the abuser, towards the one that's hurting them. They will carry around a lot of guilt, a lot of shame, and this is not the only motivation why they choose to stay, but it is a huge part of why they choose to stay because the abuser will try to use certain words and use certain language and use whatever he knows that use whatever that the abuser knows to try to linger you back into a connection or relationship with them. Now, I believe that anybody that should feel guilty or should feel shame should be an abuser. And that's what I just said earlier. It is crazy to me that the victim develops a stronger connection with the abuser by all the abusive things that the abuser is doing. That's kind of strange and it's crazy to me, but it happens. It happens. So it is possible that trauma can somehow cause the person to develop a connection with the abuser. The pain that the abuser is taking the victim through can cause a connection. The trauma that the abuser is taking a victim through can cause and develop or create a connection. So you may be asking, how is this connection developed? There are three ways, based off of my research, that I feel like how this connection develops. We will put it on the string. Number one is trauma. Trauma is a series of harmful and hurtful events that has caused pain in someone's life. Number two, history. Oftentimes, when the victim has a long history with the abuser or relationship, it makes it difficult for the victim to disconnect. We've seen this happen time and time again. You've been with him 10, 15, 20, 30 years, and then all of a sudden you want to leave, then you find yourself. It's almost like taking a hook, fish hook, and just reeling you back in. Because that's what trauma bonding is. It keeps you bonded. It keeps you connected to that person. The things that y'all been through in that marriage or past marriage, the things y'all been through in that relationship, no matter how traumatizing and painful and hurtful it somehow keeps y'all together and not in a good way either. I'm not talking about because sometimes people go through things in life where they look at it and they're like, oh, it brought us closer together. No, this is different. This is when trauma affects you in such a psychological way where you feel like you have no choice but to stay. You feel like you have no choice but to be there. And number three, false hope. False hope is confident feelings about something that may not be true. It's unreal. Sometimes what keeps the victim bonded to the abuser is the endless promises, only for the victim to find themselves disappointed. I promise I won't hurt you again. I promise I won't cheat on you again. I promise I won't violate you again. I promise I won't hit you again. I promise I won't make you feel that way again. Endless promises. The victim, um, they do develop, sometimes they develop feeling hopeful, thinking that the abuser will change. They're not going to change no matter how many promises that they make. I'm not saying that abusers cannot change, but change starts with change behavior. Change starts with change behavior. It doesn't start by running this. Oh, I'm not gonna do that anymore. Because it's easy to make up stuff and say stuff just to keep the victim around and keep them victimized and to keep bringing them uh, more abuse into their lives. It's easy to do that. So you're only going to end up disappointed because they're going to be making all these promises and saying all these things, but in reality, they are just words. You have to put your words to action. It's not about just saying, I won't hurt you again. I won't do this again. You have to own it. You have to own it. And we're living in an era now where when the perpetrator hurts the victim, it's almost like they try to switch it around and make the victim feel bad and guilty and shameful as if they were the ones that were being victimized. When actually it's the other way around. And if you had a history with someone who's that way and they just refuse to own what they've done, to own, hey, I've traumatized you, I've hurt you, and not just say that, but tell them how you did it. If you with someone, or like I said, have been with someone who's like to flip the strip, as I was telling somebody the other day on the phone, that's somebody you don't need to be connected to because they're not going to change. They're going to keep doing it over and over and over again, putting more false hope into your life. So let's move right along. Why would the victim develop a strong sense of loyalty towards the abuser, despite the fact that the bonder is damaging to them? I thought about that the other day. The abuser is abusing the victim, traumatizing the victim, and for some reason that causes the victim to develop a strong loyalty and connection with the abuser. And we must also understand that trauma bonding is not only a psychological response to abuse, but it is also a strong emotional attachment. This is why a lot of them go back. This is why a lot of them have a hard time not leaving that relationship. And I understand that comes with many things if you have kids and all that stuff. So I'm not here saying, oh, just leave. I mean, that's my desire if you're in a relationship like that. But I do understand that there are certain dynamics and certain things that does make it difficult to leave an abuser. There's a lot of repercussions and things you have to face when doing that. So all I'm saying is sometimes there's not only a psychological attachment, there is an emotional attachment. And oftentimes when you are emotionally attached to a person, it makes it very difficult to leave that individual because you've almost developed a bond together. So why does trauma bonding happen? This is a $1 million question. Why does trauma bonding happen? Well, research shows that bonding actually occurs because we have become addicted to the emotional roller coaster that the abuser has put you on. And isn't that crazy that our brain can become so addicted to the abuse that even though it's terrible, even though you hate it, even though you don't like how this person is treating you, the love and attention that you get afterwards sometimes make you forget that anything ever happened. That's trauma bonding. And sometimes the victim stays connected to the abuser because after the abuser typically rewards the victim with gifts and flowers and promises, which actually makes you feel good for the moment. It's temporary, but it's also short term because as soon as you tick him off again or whatever the case may be, they're right back to square A. So understanding what trauma bonding is and how to recognize it, I believe is the first step towards healing for you. A lot of people are in trauma bonding relationships. And not only are they in trauma bonding relationships, many of them are even blind to it. Another important thing you need to know also is that the cycle of abuse can create a false sense of safety. How many of you have ever really and truly felt safe with your abuser? And while there is so much more to cover in this subject. I want to close today's program by talking about some signs of trauma bonding. I would like to also encourage you to do your own research because I'm just laying a foundation today. I'm going to give you bits and pieces and examples and things like that. There's so much more to trauma bonding that you need to know and be aware of. Because as I said, you may not know that you're in it until you learn what trauma bonding really is. So let me give you some signs right quick. Number one, a clear sign of emotional trauma bonding is denial. That is when the person who is experiencing abuse chooses to ignore any obvious red flags that they may see in their relationship. And trust me, they see it. But they're in denial. Those who have been through trauma bonding with someone, they're in denial. You can tell them you're good enough. You don't got to deal with that crap. You don't got to deal with the abuse. You don't got to tolerate the physical, sexual, emotional, psychological abuse. You don't have to deal with that. You can tell them, and they can see it, and internally they may even know it. But at the same time, part of them is like they don't even believe it because they are in denial that it's even happening, even though realistically it is. Number two, justifying the abuser's behavior. You have to rationale that when you're in a relationship like this means that you create or make excuses for the abuser. We've seen that happen from time to time. No matter what the abuser is doing, it doesn't matter what they're doing, you still find yourself making excuses for the abuser. Number three, you feel stuck in that relationship and do not see a way out of it. This can go back to history, as I was talking about earlier. If you've been with somebody a long time, you may not see your way out of it. Number four, finding yourself always walking on eggshells. Always having your faults pointed out at you, your wrongs, your inadequacies, your weakness. Who wants to be in a relationship like that? I know I don't. Number five, the abuser isolates you from others. And you know what? You know what the purpose of the abuser doing this? The purpose is to control you. The purpose is to manipulate you. Because if I can isolate you from your friends, if I can isolate you from your family, if I can isolate you from your coworkers or anybody from any human being, I then have a great chance and access to control you and do what I feel and want to do with you. Number six, when you try to leave, you feel an immediate sense of longing to see the abuser. I've seen this happen from time to time again. I've actually experienced it where an individual leaves them and all of a sudden you find yourself missing that person. Even though this person has abused you. Now help me make that make sense. Is that what y'all say? Help me make that make sense. How is it that you have a strong sense of longing, wanting to see the person that abused you? I cannot wrap my mind around this subject. I really can't, but it is real. It does happen. Number seven, they are reluctant or unwilling to take the steps to leave or break that bond. They can kind of be connected to what we talked about earlier about what? Denial. Some people are in denial. They don't want to break that bond because I call it familiarity. They are familiar. They go back sometimes because they are familiar. They don't want to try anything new. They don't want to do better for themselves. And I'm not saying that's the case for everyone, but sometimes you gotta look at it that way. Like if you got resources and people in your life that's trying to help you and you're in denial, you're not even trying to break the bond. You still have ties, soul ties connected to this person. You're not even trying, and that's how people are gonna look at you in that sense. That you're not even trying to break this bond with this person. So for anyone out there that may be experiencing trauma bonding, once again, do your research. There is resources out there. I'm sure there are hotline numbers out there. You can contact a trauma therapist or someone who specializes in trauma. You can even probably even talk to a friend if you're someone who has experienced trauma bonding. I really hope you enjoyed today's show. Have you been in a trauma bonding relationship? If you have, please comment below. Let me know your thoughts. And until next time, I hope you have an amazing day. Make sure you subscribe to our YouTube channel, Henry Harris 100, or the Brother Henry and You Show. You can also connect with us on Facebook.com, the Brother Henry and You Show. You can also connect with us on Soul TV, on Facebook.com. May God bless you. We'll see you next week. Well, Perry, you are awesome.
Thank you, brother. Thank you, and I appreciate you what you're doing too, buddy.
Well, thank you. Because if you allow the world to define you, if you allow friends to define you, if you allow your spouse to define you, or anybody to define you outside of how God sees you, that does open the door to rejection. God bless you. I hope y'all have an amazing day.
Thank you, Brother Henry.
Thank
God bless
you.
you too. Thank you for having us.